many cards that actually really help, because all this weapon hate...
Create a board, just stop his opponent from doing anything. And
matchup might be difficult. In terms of experience, Tom is looking at pretty good as we get into game number 1. Tom on the Rogue, Ryvius on the Mage. Let's go. I see a Conjurer's Calling already, so seemingly pretty good, but what do you make of it in the opening hand for, this specific matchup?
From the Mage, the Conjurer's Calling is a very powerful card. It's not necessarily what you might be looking for right off the bat, and Ryvius has to decide if he wants to keep this with anything else, or if he wants to keep... so he ended up keeping just 1. I think keeping 1 is fine. Keeping 2 is like a bit excessive. Yeah. Obviously, it's a twin spell, so you can use it multiple times. But Conjurer's Calling by itself doesn't do anything. If you end up drawing like 3 or 4 spells, the Conjurer's Calling is sitting in your hand, and you can't do a whole lot with it. From Tom's side, we actually see him pitch the sap back. Recognizes going first, he's going to have a much harder time activating Miscreant or Raiding Party. He's going to want other stuff, even though sap can be a very powerful tool against the Mage.
Yeah, a lot of the time an early sap is specifically for a Mountain Giant, and this deck has so many other things it can do that you might not end up seeing a Mountain Giant for a while anyway, so I do like the throw, and with double prep as well, it means that Tom has access to some fairly powerful turns in at least the early game, but Ryvius with a Sorcerer's Apprentice and some spells, you do always have to be aware that one Sorcerer's Apprentice even can make this deck do really nutty things.
Interestingly, I think Ryvius here is deciding whether or not he wants to play out the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Obviously, it's very easy to kill from the Rogue side with a backstab, or even if it's if it's a dire situation, you think you can get rid of it. But I think from Ryvius' perspective, if he plays a Sorcerer's Apprentice here, he has the option to go Khadgar, Coin, Conch Calling on the Apprentice the turn after, which gives him an incredibly wide board. And how does Rogue deal with wide boards? It just doesn't.
It doesn't. Yeah, it needs to discover or vanish, but Ryvius, after just deliberating for the whole extent of his turn, does just decide to hold on a little bit and ping face. And I do think actually this is one of the nuances of the deck that is very, very difficult to learn, is you don't always have to be doing things, because when you do decide to go off, you can do it so crazy that you gain such a singular powerful turn that you don't really need the build up a lot of the time. You can just decide, I'll wait, and then bam, the game's won.
Yeah, you can definitely do some explosive turns, and Ryvius did decide to hold back the Sorcerer's Apprentice in favor of hoping to get to one of those turns later. Tom using the prep to activate the Miscreant, doesn't want to shove the Eviscerate face just yet.
Yeah, I think Eviscerate is so valuable in just dealing with the pesky minions, the awkward ones, even if it's just an Apprentice. That's scary in this deck. Like, every minion is pretty scary when it's just left to sit on the board. But right now, Tom's putting on a pretty aggressive front here. This Hench Clan I mentioned earlier is going to be a little bit of a problem. It's just going to be froze out with that first version of Ray of Frost. But Ryvius has to piece together some kind of plan, because at the moment there are 2 minions on board that are pretty difficult to deal with.
Yeah, Mage doesn't have a lot of single target removal per se. We have a couple of Ray of Frosts that kind of delay the game a little bit until you can get those explosive turns, and you can use Ray of Frost as removal. Obviously the first iteration freezes a minion, but if it's already frozen you can deal 2 damage with it. But with just the 1 twin spell you can't really kill off the Hench Clan Thug, so Ryvius is pinging it off, trying to see if there's some way he can deal with it later on.
It does have magic tricks, so you can discover either AoE or direct removal in the form of, say, a Frostbolt, or maybe a Flame Strike for later on. A small note as well, if the Hench Clan ever gets too big, with the abundance of Conjurer's Calling he's got, he can just Conjurer's Call it to say, okay, you have 2 3-drops, which isn't great, but it might be better than a Hench Clan that's becoming as big as a Mountain Giant pretty soon.
It'd have to get pretty big before we see Ryvius Conch Calling it, but yeah, that's definitely a factor to consider. Similarly, a big Edwin can be dealt with in the same fashion, using Conjurer's Calling to deal with a 16-16 and make it a 3-3 into 2-4.
Seems good to me. And now Ryvius might have to start making tough choices. I think he'd kill for a Frost Nova right about now, so he can actually set up some kind of board. Then Nova, especially after seeing 1 prep and an SI used, it's there's got to be limitations in how much removal from hand that Tom has left.
Ryvius opting for Ziliax this turn. There's not a whole lot he can do with the rest of his hand. There's quite a lot of, I don't want to call them combo pieces. They do, like, all these cards can be used with so many different other cards in the deck, but he doesn't quite have a perfect, like a good turn to do to kick off. So he's using the Ziliax now to kind of stall out for an extra turn.
I think as well, something to note if you're not too familiar with this deck, there are a lot of cards in hand, and they cost, collectively quite a lot of mana. They can all be played in 1 turn, more or less, at some points. So This large hand size can get, small really quickly, but for the trade-off for a very powerful turn, and with the help of that bad boy, the Mana Cyclone, then you're about to see some fun things happen as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Every spell that Ryvius plays in this turn, he can then generate that number equal back to him with the Mana Cyclone, and I think that's what we're about to see.
Quickly picking up a nice berry off of the magic trick, recognizing that he's going to need some extra life to work with.
Oh, look at this.
So instead of going for the Mana Cyclone route, Ryvius found a way to be able to play his Mountain Giant this turn, which is huge. He knows Tom is only running one sap, and even with the sap, there's a lot of other stuff on board now, so freezing the Henge Clan Thug, preventing that from going face.
Yeah, and this is huge, right? This is what I was saying. Like, out of nowhere, Ryvius had nothing, and now he has a full board, one of which is a Sea Giant.
Tom knows exactly where he's going, and that's to the bottom of his deck. Edwin pickup. If he had picked up a sap here, that would have been incredible, but he can still clean up quite a bit of the board. He has a backstep now. He can deal with either Khadgar or 3-2 if he chooses. He can decide how much he wants to throw face. We didn't pick up a Leroy. We did not, sorry, pick up a Leroy, so there's a bit less burst damage available to Tom. There's an Eviscerate on the far left of his hand. I'm not sure if you can see it in the corner there.
There is also Nomi with a Shadow Step as well.
Yeah.
So, not that you can do it this turn, of course, but just something to consider as double Shadow Step. My only question is, do you actually assume this Cleave is going to not be dealt with? I mean, we can obviously see this double Conjurer's Call in, but with Frost Novas and stuff, do you need to go all in on Cleave, or is there something better to do this turn that feels a little bit safer?
I think it'd be very difficult for Ryvius to ever deal with one Nomi, let alone 2 or 3. If it's being dealt with, air quotes, it's going to be with a Frost Nova, and that's not really dealing with it. So I think going in for Big Edwin could be a definite possibility here. He might choose to SI instead to maybe clean up a few other minions, but I think Edwin's just the best way to go. Like, even though you know your opponent has like a Conjurer's Calling, if they Conjurer's Calling your Edwin instead of their Sea Giant, you're pretty okay with that.
And also you do have the refill of the Nomi, as you said, so even if this board is wiped, you can just drop Nomi and say, well, can you do anything else? Because you need a lot of Frost Novas to make this work.
So Ryvius in a difficult spot here. He can't quite value trade off a Sea Giant into an Edwin. If it was a 9-9, you could, and then Conjurer's Calling, but there's not really any taunts at 10 mana either, so that's probably out of the question. He's likely very happy he picked up the Ice Barrier for the magic trick, because it looks like he's going to be taking a lot of damage with the next turn or two.
I wonder if in a round, like, he tries to kind of set up some kind of 2-turn, so he could trade off the Ziliax, maybe think about killing the Hench Clan, and then just Ice Barrier and let the Van Cleef attack equals the Ice Barrier, if that makes sense. And then just push damage and Conjurer's Call in the Sea Giant.
Well, he has to think about how much damage he can play around. Leroy 6, if you look at the board, so the Ziliax is very likely going to die because you have to get through the taunt either to kill face or clear the rest of the board. He's hoping for some Mulch Munchers here, a 10 mana rush minion. That would help him a lot if he does happen to hit it. With Khadgar still on the board,
Whoa.
Not quite.
Okay. I mean, it's still good going forward.
Oh yeah, definitely. So Ryvius went for this play. The Mulch Muncher high roll would have been incredible and would have let him basically clear the entire board and set up lethal, I believe. This way he's just saying, all right, I can't play around, Leroy step, whatever.
And I believe this is lethal, right?
So there's the Edwin, there's an Eviscerate in hand.
And he could just play the one drop and then Shadow Step, right, to proc the extra damage anyway. So he can Shadow Step the SI and replay and still go for the Eviscerate. So Tom just put on too much a little bit too quickly. And with no Frost Nova, Ryvius just could not defend quick enough. And yeah, that game looked a little bit rough there for Ryvius. So maybe I take it all back. Maybe Ro can just get the job done.
Have right now. So Ryvius in his secondary deck, and we can see that actually in the opening hand, he has a Vex Crow. He has 2 Vex Crows in there and 2 Acidic Swamp Oozes. And he took out a Sea Giant, 2 Astromancers, and an MC Tech, and one of the Novas. Adding some extra weapon hate, and the Vex Crow is another way to use some of the cheap spells in the deck to try and create a wide board that's difficult for the Rogue to deal with. From Tom's side, he's added in a Sap and a Walk the Plank, a Life Drinker, and an extra Southsea deckhand, and he took out the weapon hate we see in his primary list, as well as taking out the Ziliax and the Chef Nomi. The saps, the extra sap and the extra Walk the Plank, actually it's just 1 copy of Walk the Plank, will help him deal with some of the big minions that he's expecting Ryvius to develop.
Right, yeah, and then, we saw actually yesterday from Ryvius this Vex Crow getting some work done. I was very, very impressed with it as it came out, I think on turn 5 or 6, and then just summoned a full board, and it was just, oh, yeah, okay. We have to see if it's enough, though, because as you said, Tom has now, or more than likely, teched into the anti-mage build where he can get rid of these big singular threats a little bit easier with the help of the extra sap and walk the plank. We'll see how it starts though. But Ryvius off to just a, I won't even call it a slow start because this deck often just doesn't do much on turns, 2 to 3 maybe, and then goes off a little bit more on 4. So especially versus Rogue, where there's quick answers here, but a quick coin SI, Tom is not messing around this game.
Yeah, I mean, he knows if he gives the mage time, obviously every turn you draw a card, the more cards that Ryvius gets, the more likely he'll be able to make one of those explosive turns we'll be talking about that he didn't quite manage to get last game. So Tom putting on the pressure very quickly.
And continuing to follow that up as well is the prep raiding party. Yeah, Ryvius' face it just looks, he's like, wow, coin SI into prep raiding party SI number 2. This might already be a little bit too much damage.
Sandbinder coming down, drawing a Mana Cyclone. Could have been a Mountain Giant as well. Those are elementals.
I think most importantly, the Sandbinder to it be able to potentially at least threaten the 3-2 SI7 agent is going to be cleaned up by the weapon. And now there's a Corsair. It's going from bad to worse for Mr. Ryvius here. But he does have Vexcrow into Mirror Image. And now there's Ray of Frost as well. So he can do something. It's just the idea is how long can he hold off till he makes the big play, right? Is he going to be already too close to being dead? Right now we see that weapon removal get picked up, so already these tech cards getting the job done. And even the Mana Cyclone to keep the card count high.
So Ryvius recognizing he can't really wait much longer. It's turn 5, he has 17 health, he can't really be taking that much more chip damage, so he throws down the Ooze to get rid of Tom's Waggle Pick, which bounces back with the SI7 agents. And with 2 Mana Cyclones in hand, it's very unlikely this game is going to go super long and he's going to need value off of both Cyclones. So Ryvius threw out an initial Ray of Frost and played the Mana Cyclone out just to get an extra thing on board and get 1 extra card in hand.
Yeah, and also being able to make this play last turn for Ryvius, it means that he can now Vexcrow, Mirror Image, and use the second Ray of Frost to create even more minions and stall out the game even more. And I would be surprised if he does anything but that this turn.
He might have to opt for something a bit more defensive than that.
Is there anything much more defensive? I mean, there's Rabble Bouncer and then the Mirror Image, but Rabble Bouncer into what's probably going to be maybe even just the Conjurer's Calling next turn. Is that too risky? I don't know.
No, he just settled for the Vexcrow. I think the Rabble Bouncer doesn't actually do enough, and he needs something big coming out of these out of this Vexcrow. So.
And also now there's 3 attacks and 2 taunts, so that's normally okay, especially considering the Waggle Pick will bounce as well if he swings it without a buff this turn.
Tom finds lethal very quickly.
Ryvius just couldn't put up the defense needed, I feel. And there you go. A little bit of a bop on the head, a shake of the head, and their arms go in the air as Ryvius just admits defeat. And it was just like, yeah, there's just nothing really I could have done there. And this is the Rogue, I feel, that everyone